How's it going? And welcome to episode 178 of On the Wire, a proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Of course, you can follow the pod on the Twitter and on YouTube at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 80 Grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hasting can be followed at Hasting Kevin. We've got a great show lined up for you today. But before we get into all of that, Kevin, we're back at it again, on a Thursday night. And again, we are live on YouTube. Remind everybody, we're probably going to keep this schedule for at least the remainder of the season. So if you want to join us, 9:30, 9:45-ish start time every Thursday evening. We'll be live on the tube of views. Join us, show some questions in the comments. We'll get to them as best we can throughout the show. Love the interaction. Get us through these can be short and long weeks of the final stretch of the season. But Kevin, how you stressing the last couple of weeks going as we get closer and closer to September? We're not far away.
Yeah, absolutely. I have some leagues I'm stressing. Definitely stressing the Royals. They've looked good recently, but we have a brutal stretch coming up. 20 games. We have the Phillies this weekend, 4 versus Cleveland, 4 versus Houston, Minnesota in there, New York Yankees, Cleveland again. That's the teams we play for the next 20 games. So if they hang on to this playoff spot, they are going to earn it.
Yeah, I mean that feels good though, right? It feels
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. It's going to be fun
when it happens. Obviously, you have an excuse built up if it doesn't happen. So that's the beauty of talking about that. We all knew the schedule was going to be too tough, and yeah. But when it does happen, it's like, hey, yeah, they earned it. That was a tough schedule. They're going to be a tough matchup in the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. So we've all heard all the narrative.
The American League is crazy. Not just the wild card, but how bunched up the top is. The division leaders. Like Kansas City's 2 back of Cleveland, tied with Minnesota, who is 2 back of Cleveland. They're only 2.5 back of Baltimore for the first wild card, who's only half a game behind the Yankees. Yes. 4 of the best record in the league. I mean, both buys are still up in the air in the American League, right?
It's not really Uncle Ted, thank you for joining us on YouTube right away with a comment. I appreciate it. But does it really is kind of, we talked about this with the National League earlier on in the season about how the entire National League was in it. Obviously, that we knew that was going to par itself down as the season wore on. But like in the American League, it's not only bunched up in the middle, but like you said, it's all the division races are still up for grabs. It doesn't seem like anything is tied up.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. It's always more fun that way, even if it is your team in the middle of it. Of course, you just rather you see your team run away with it, but in general, it's definitely more fun to kind of see everybody kind of fight it out for it. Well, speaking of fighting it out, let's fight over some of these news items that we're gonna get into here. Let's start off with some guys that are not going to be part of that fight, at least for the next 15 days. And I'm not talking injuries. I'm talking demotions, guys getting optioned down for various reasons. Kevin, I'm wondering, of this group, which one, I guess, are you most disappointed in? And some of them, you might not be disappointed in any of them because there's reasons for these demotions, obviously. And then which ones actually open up time for somebody else to kind of take advantage of it. So going down the list here, Houston, they demoted Trey Cabbage, who we saw them take on from the Angels earlier on this season. St. Louis demoted Nolan Gorman, who had just been hitting up a storm for parts of the season, but striking out just as much. New York Yankees demoted Oswald Peraza just earlier today on Thursday, and same with San Diego demoting their a member of their rotation for pretty much the entire season, Matt Waldron, the knuckleballer. Seen a lot of issues recently, especially with the home run ball. So of this group, like which one are you the most surprised about / disappointed in?
Well, we knew that this very well could happen with Mount Waldron, but it's always fun, at least for me. I love watching knuckleball pitchers, and it was fun seeing the success he had. And yes, it had gone sideways over the multiple of his last few starts. So it's not a huge surprise, but he's the only one of these guys I had rostered anywhere, even in spite of a couple of shaky outings recently. But yeah, yeah, I'll let him go now as well. Probably should have last week, but he's the one I'm gonna miss, and not just from my fantasy teams, but yeah, I love watching a knuckleballer pitch.
So you're not the one. You haven't bought in one of those "Can't Trust a Knuckleballer" T-shirts that they call it. It's a fun.
Well,
It's a fun
it's
shirt. It's a
true.
fun shirt.
I just acknowledged how true that
It's
is,
true.
but,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely enjoy watching them when it is working.
Yeah, fair. You can enjoy something that you don't trust. So that does work out. I guess I was a little surprised by the Nolan Gorman demotion in general. Just regardless, I mean, of his strikeout issues and other things, just because of what he had brought to the table with the Cardinals, and what he had been able to produce. I'm not sure, like, if there's something else he can work on in AAA that he couldn't continue to do at the major league level, even in a maybe of a more limited capacity, rather than just doing it every day down in AAA at this point in the season. But is there something else? Is there somebody else in St. Louis that can kind of take advantage of the time that he leaves on the table?
Well, I don't I was looking at this earlier, Adam, and I think what's going on here, there may not be, well, there should be, hopefully there is, specific things they want him to work on, but I think a lot of it is just even this time of year, for a young guy like Gorman, everyday at bats. Newt Bar is back to playing close to every day. Tommy Pham, the same on the corner, and the other corner outfield spot, and Victor Scott is the everyday center fielder in spite of hitting well below 200.
Mhm.
So that's who they're running out there, with Victor Scott being the defensive center fielder, obviously, and then Pham and Newtbar on the corners in the lineup. The designated hitter the last couple of days coming back from injury, Matt Carpenter. So if this is how they're going to roll their lineup most days, they're Nolan Gorman is still at the point in his career where it's beneficial to get everyday at bats.
Yeah, the thing is that he wasn't getting everyday at bats anyway.
Right.
So it's like for them to make this change, so that he can get everyday at bats. It was just weird timing. It's like if there was already a point 3-4 weeks ago where they realized, hey, you're going to start losing time anyway. Why not just send them down then? But obviously, I'm not a
It
GM
it may be as simple as you can be one of the best prospects around, but when Matt Carpenter comes back, you're losing your spot.
Yeah. Of course, forgot to mention, of course, Jordan Walker, as quickly as they returned him to the major leagues, also got the boot pretty much in the same time as Nolan Gorman, returning him as well. So I'm venturing to guess that, that's is it a similar boat. He was demoted the day before Gorman did. He only made 3 starts in his time back in St. Louis. Just not doing enough, I guess, there as well. But to your
Short side
point, a lot
platoon
of
as well, right?
returnees as well. What's that?
All of Walker's were short side platoon starts as well, I believe.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't he wasn't getting a lot of playing time anyway.
Right. Right. All right. Let's see. Colorado. Now we'll get into guys missing time, not due to demotions, but more to injury here. Colorado, they lost their second closer, in the last couple weeks. Victor Vodnik hits the IL with shoulder inflammation. And it makes, as I mentioned to you right before we started recording, it makes me sad for myself that I am sad about this, because I was actually relying on a Colorado closer in at least one important league of mine. And now I have to determine whether or not I want to spend my time and my money uh, bidding on what could be a replacement closer in Colorado. Should I be doing that? And if so, who should I be paying attention to in Colorado in their closer situation?
I I think it's probably gonna be Tyler Kinney. We
I mean,
did
that's
we
who I have
did
my
see
eye on. But yeah, good.
yeah,
I'm glad to hear you say
yeah,
that.
we did see Shavili get the most recent save, and Kinley was in the game earlier and did get a hold. Um, it but Kinley, I just think the cool thing about Kinley is, yeah, he's got good numbers on the season anyway, but the appearances where he's given up runs, especially the appearances where he's given up multiple runs this season, have mostly been on the road. He's been amazing at Coors Field. He's given up 1 run since June 18th. That's over 2 months.
Mhm.
He's given up 1 run at home. So I think we'll see him. He's somebody I probably would feel comfortable. I don't think Colorado is gonna get a lot of wins, a ton of save opportunities, but at this point in the season, we're looking for anything we can get in a category, and he would be the Rocky that I would be after, in spite of the fact that them being home all this coming week.
Yeah, they have a bunch, like you said, they have the 7 games at Colorado, but then they have a nice little 3 series road trip right after that. They get nice little stretches. So then they've got a week at home as well. So they do have a good mix. They're not like at home the majority of the time for the remainder of the season. It actually looks like they actually have more home games. Sorry, they have more away games maybe the rest of the way than home games, if I'm counting my little colored blocks correctly, the schedule grid. But either way, it's not, weighted one way or the other. So maybe, and again, we know at this point the only reason you're actually worried about, going into Colorado is because of the park itself, and it's not because of the team that you're playing. So there's always a chance. So this is the opposite anyway. They were talking about a pitcher, and it's not because they can pitch poorly. It's because how many save opportunities is Colorado actually going to provide? And that's where I'm more questioning. There are other situations there are other closing situations out there that are, more interesting because they are slightly better teams, but you just don't know which direction they're going to go in yet. Maybe by the time you listen to this, you will, because I'm alluding to Peter Fairbanks going on the IL for Tampa Bay, and a couple of options there that we are yet to see that really solidify. And we know Tampa Bay's history, especially when it's not somebody they've locked down to a contract, or have the, expectation of trading because they're, just bringing up their numbers to make them look better. And so, I mean, are you more interested in the situation in Tampa Bay because there might be a couple extra saves to go around than Colorado?
It it really depends on the week. This week I probably would be, in spite of everything I said about how good Kinley has been at home at Coors Field. It's still not something that I run run and seek out. Yeah, I want the
Mhm.
closer in Colorado. So I think at least for this coming week, I'd probably be more interested in Edwin Ucita in Tampa, for example. I think he's got a shot, in spite of, how Tampa likes to run things, as you've alluded to. And yeah, and the next on the outline here, Doval. coming back to the Giants soon, it sounds like, and to the bullpen, but we don't know the role. Uh, the way their last couple of save opportunities have went, I think most Giants fans are right. Why isn't Duvall in there? So it looks fairly likely we're going to see him in that spot again fairly soon. Maybe not the first couple of opportunities, but yeah, Kansas City. I'd been talking the last few weeks about I really thought they wanted Hunter Harvey to have that job, and I still believe that is what they wanted, but he's on the IL, so it is Urseg. I think they'd rather have Urseg as that fireman type. Now he's going to be saved for the ninth inning more times than not. They'll still bring him in earlier in the game if they think they absolutely need him. But there's several of these situations up in the air for this time of year.
Yeah, there really is. It's like like there's a lot of situation. Well, the other situation that comes to mind is Miami. That it's like you're pretty sure you know who the closer is, but like Colorado, there really hasn't been enough opportunities to really name somebody.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think Fauché has gotten the most of the or the only maybe one or two of the saves that have come up since Tanner Scott has been traded. So you obviously by default name him the closer, but does it matter like when you're not when there's not enough opportunities? And then you know what ends up happening by default is the pitcher still gets, they have to get innings, so they get put into non-save situations. They're fine, but then of course the next day
They're
there's
not
a save.
available for the save opportunity.
Exactly. So then even though the situation shouldn't be cloudy, it is made cloudy by default. So yeah, that's fun. That's fun. Yeah, Duvall coming back should be back by the time you listen to this. He very well might be back into the bullpen for the Giants. So kind of see where that takes it when he comes into his first appearance. Don't expect him in the ninth on his first time, but yeah, it could be in short order, especially if he's kind of fixed a little bit of his, just a little bit of his control issues by the time after his first couple starts. Another IL sent down, going to San Diego, or back down to San Diego. Hung Sung Kim got hit the IL with right shoulder inflammation. Should be out for a little while here. What impact are you seeing so far, or what do you expect to see in the San Diego infield and the lineup in general with Kim out for a while?
Yeah, this is intriguing so far. So the first 3 games after Hae-Sung Kim hit the injured list, we saw Tyler Wade versus 3 right-handed starting pitchers. Makes perfect sense. They used him earlier in the year. We know he can play good defense at shortstop. Little bit of speed, intriguing for the fantasy teams that need stolen bases. And then on Thursday, they called up Mason McCoy and played him at shortstop once again versus a right-handed starting pitcher, hitting in that same number 9 spot where Tyler Wade does. And probably brings similar things to fantasy as Tyler Wade. Not a great batting average. That's an understatement, but not much power, stolen base threat. Very similar profiles here. Which one are we going to see going forward? We're really going to have to monitor this over the weekend and maybe see a lefty or two as well and see what they're doing here. Like I said, the first 3 games, it was Tyler Wade. And then now on Thursday, Mason McCoy, who they just called up yesterday on Wednesday. So this definitely is going to be some monitoring over the weekend. Other than that, the lineup has uh, stayed solid. And yes, we finally got a little bit of news on Fernando Tatis Jr. He was running on the field and taking batting practice on the field on Thursday. Still not a timeline. So until we see him out on a rehab assignment, David Peralta will continue to be the everyday right fielder as well. So all we're seeing is uh, Kyle Higashioka and Luis Capusano splitting time at catcher about half and half. And now we have this Tyler Wade, Mason McCoy battle for the number 9 spot and shortstop. So that's what we're watching for.
Yeah, I don't know. It's almost like nice to know that like when somebody who you trust to play every day takes some time off for whatever reason, that multiple people are going to take it. So if you know the situation, you either know to avoid it or at least you know to monitor it. It's not something you have to go jump at right away. But at this point in the season, sometimes you do have to take that risk and then cross your fingers and hope you pick the right one that ends up taking the majority of the playing time. Yeah, and if you saw the fact that Tatis Jr. did hit the 60-day IL instead of the 10-day IL, don't worry about
That's
it. He'll,
yeah, it
he-
doesn't mean anything.
yeah, he's already he's very close to already passing that 60-day mark anyway. So, it was just just a move that they had to make for roster construction. All right. So another IL sent, of course, going to the New York Yankees now. Luis Heel hits the IL with a lower back strain, leaving his start in some obvious pain in his most recent start. Will Warren returns and expected to, are you expecting to see him produce in this stint, whether it's enough to keep him from being, demoted after he returns, or just enough to produce for you to, be bidding on him this weekend?
Um, man, I I just can't for now. Um, I he could end up being a great major league pitcher at some point, but yeah, he looked decent against the White Sox. But he did give up 7 hits, including a home run in 5 innings. That's a 1.4 whip against the Chicago White Sox. The Angels pounded him for 8 earned runs in less than 5 innings. At Philadelphia, I'm not going to hold it against him, giving up 4 runs in 5 and a third at Philadelphia. But 10 runs in barely over 9 innings versus the Angels and White Sox. I know that's a really small sample. I know he just came back up, but it's just not something I'm going to get excited about.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously pitching for, a winning team. So he's got that going
Yeah,
for him. So if chasing wins, I mean, you have to take some
I
consideration
was.
here. Yeah, I know you.
Yep. And
So
he gets Rocky Road on Sunday. Hopefully that gets him okay, and then we would see him next weekend versus St. Louis. So if he handles Colorado the way he should, then that St. Louis start would be appealing with that lineup behind him. Yes. But if he has problems with Colorado, I won't even be interested in that.
see, oh no, sure. I guess part of me is hoping that it'll be more like a Cade Povich return. After he returns, it's like, oh, he must have, got the king, got the jitters out, got whatever, got sent down, got called back up, and then okay, cool. Even though Warren's call up and down was a lot quicker than Povich's was, obviously Povich did really well coming back in his return, enough to get sent down just to get called right back up, and he's starting tomorrow and Friday. So we'll see if we can continue that. But it'll. I'm hoping for the same thing. Well, as a Red Sox fan, I'm not hoping for the same thing for Warren, but as somebody who's just interested from a fantasy perspective, I'll be rooting for that kind of play, how that to play out. All right, let's go to somebody who looked like he might be taking some time off, but not so much. As I assumed would happen, Dom Smith was released by my Boston Red Sox as soon as Tristan Casas was returned from the IL, but he quickly signed another major league deal, this time with the Cincinnati Reds. Jake Fraley was also part of that roster move, not the exact corresponding move, but he hit the IL to make room on the roster. Couple of different things happening in Cincinnati, and I'll lump this one in here as well because we're going to get to it next. Amon Rosario also signs with Cincinnati after being released by the Dodgers. So a little bit of a mix-up happening in Cincinnati in the last week or so. Anything interesting that you've been seeing from these moves and expect to see because the Dom Smith one just happened today.
Yeah, the Ahmed Rosario is what I don't know what to think of. Now he's only started once in 4 games, throw out the first day, maybe even 2, but still first start, and he's in right field. He's not even playing infield.
Mm.
So I really don't know what to think about Rosario. He's playing right field tonight. Will Benson, it's his 3rd time on the bench to start a game versus a righty in 4 games. So maybe we're not going to see much Will Benson any longer. As far as Dominic Smith goes, this is strong side platoon, right? Those that were picking up Ty France last week because he was getting playing time versus both righties and lefties, that's probably gone away. Hopefully you got production out of him
Yeah.
this
Yep.
week, because you're going to have to, it was last week's pickup, this week's drop. We see that a lot, especially in 12s, but even in a 15, I think that'll be the case, because I think this is a straight platoon. Dom Smith versus righties and Ty France versus lefties for Cincinnati, who does have 7 games at home this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see. I mean, didn't Cleveland try the experiment with Rosario in the outfield? How did that turn
Yeah.
out? Did that turn out well? I don't remember. Anybody out there?
He's
Although
been on
that,
several other teams since then,
yeah,
so
yes. It's hard to remember these things.
well,
Now,
it's kind of fun. Cincinnati is managing their Major League Baseball team the way we manage fantasy baseball
the
teams. They're
more
turning
position eligibility, the better.
they
Yes.
are turning and burning. Pick up
They're
Ty
just
France for
streaming
a week,
hitters.
drop him for Dom Smith. Let's
There you
go.
go. Oh man. You know, that's one way to manage your baseball team. Yeah, sure. We always say, "Oh man, if they just cared more about our fantasy teams and played like
Yeah.
us, we'd all be happier." It turns out that's not necessarily the case. All right, so I alluded to the Dodgers making a whole bunch of moves. Let's get to all of those over the course of the last week and a half. They've got a whole bunch of players back. Mookie Betts, obviously, everybody is aware of, been back about a week and a half now. But they also got Max Muncy returning a day earlier than they expected. They expected him to be back on Tuesday. He came back on Monday. And at first, it was because it looked like Freddie Freeman might miss some time, but he's going to play through a fractured finger, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember seeing that correctly. He's just pain tolerance situation there. And then Chris Taylor also just returned on Thursday. And they had the debut of Tommy Edman. I'm going to say he returned from the IL, playing his first game since being traded to the Dodgers. And so his first game in blue and white, all at the expense of Ahmad Rosario going to the Cincinnati or being DFA'd and then being traded to or getting signed with the Cincinnati Reds. And then also the release of, or sorry, the DFA'd of Jason Hayward being DFA'd on Thursday. So we talked about Rosario already. Are you expecting Hayward to latch on anywhere else at this point in his career for the stretch run? At least before the end of the month, so he can be playoff eligible, or will he take the Joey Gallo route and just announce his retirement?
No, I think someone will pick up Jason Hayward for their stretch run and postseason as a platoon bat. I don't know who, but I think somebody will. Somebody can use Jason Hayward as a platoon bat slash 4th outfielder, I would think. Uh, the 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 crazy thing about all of this for me was the whole Freddie Freeman situation that you started the Dodgers talk off with. Right? Sunday he couldn't even grip a bat. So
Right.
when he was in the starting lineup Monday, I thought, "Oh, this is great." But is this going to be one of those things there where he doesn't play the rest of the week? So I still sat him in a couple of spots. Fortunately, that didn't, or at least so far, hasn't ended up hurting me, and it won't, because I can get him back in the lineup on Friday for the weekend, and 1 run and 1 RBI is all we missed out on, those of us that did sit Freddie Freeman. But that was crazy that he was back in there and didn't even miss a game after not even being able to grip a bat on Sunday.
They're going to give him like at least 1, if not 2 days of rest over the weekend as soon as you put him back in the lineup. That's how it's going to work, right?
That's what I was worried about Monday would happen
Exactly.
Tuesday and Wednesday.
Well,
Yeah,
they
it's so
said
frustrating.
Max Muncy was taking grounders at first base in preparation of having to play it. And that was also the expectation of why they called him up on Monday, so that if Freeman did need to miss some time, they'd have somebody. It's not like Muncy has no experience at first base. Obviously, he played first base plenty.
Mhm.
When he had when he had three-way eligibility at one point in his career, playing first, second, and third base. So I won't be too surprised, as good as Freeman is and as better as the Dodgers are having him in the lineup at any given time, to give the dude a day off, to rest his hand, even if it's not gonna like hurt his hand to play with it more, it just hurts. Like it just give him some time off. But of course, you have to consider that from a fantasy perspective. Obviously, you don't want that to happen unless it's actually hurting him at the plate and in his production. If you start seeing that, yeah, he hasn't hit a home run this week, sure, but he's still hitting the ball. He's still at least producing at least 1 run and 1 RBI, as you mentioned. So I don't know. You get away whatever the possibilities are in that situation there. With Hayward and Rosario off the books, how are Chris Taylor and Tommy Edman like fitting into the situation? We obviously know what Mookie Betts is doing, and I mean the show we don't really care. But with these two guys, are they going to be coming in here playing like their old roles, or Edman's old role from what he was used to in St. Louis? Or are they kind of putting them into different situations based on what they need right now?
Kevin Kiermaier's been hitting pretty well recently. Uh, Going back to like August 10th, he's got several nice games, including a couple of multi-hit games in there. Got some RBIs and runs scored. And the reason I'm bringing up Kevin Kiermaier is because when this first went down, uh, excuse me, Tommy Edman. I was drawing a blank there, like I do at least once every week on some popular player's name. Tommy Edman had been in center, and they moved him to shortstop for the past couple of games and got Kiermaier back in center field. So I think it is really going to depend on how much the Dodgers want to play Kiermaier. Obviously, they're comfortable doing it. That this makes like 5 of the past 6 games he's been the starting center fielder, although it appeared they may have wanted that to be Tommy Edman's spot when he first came back, and now, "Oh, we need you at shortstop, put Kevin Kiermaier back out there." So I think that's probably what we're gonna see, is that's the way it's only been a couple games, but it makes sense, and it's what they did right out the gate.
Yeah, it's just be interesting to see how Taylor kind of fits back into everything as well. But it's we knew that Edman had the ability to kind of move around from his time in St. Louis, and just had multi eligibility in so many situations. So not too much of a surprise. Seeing Mookie back in right field is nice for those who want him to keep outfield eligibility for 2025, keep that triple eligibility in most formats. So that that's nice, because he was set to lose outfield eligibility going into next year if that didn't happen, but he should very easily keep that. All right. Last thing, as we talk about position eligibility, rumors are that Alex Bregman could start playing first base due to his injury concerns right now, just to get him back in the lineup on a regular basis. Does that? I mean, that just leads to the question, like, when somebody gains eligibility at this point in the season, does that really matter to you at this point? When we get this close to the end, you know what your roster is or what you need. It's not so much positions, it's more statistical categories. Or are you more interested in something like this with the possibility of 2025 drafts going into, if you're into one of those really early drafts, is this something you're considering, I guess?
Yeah, I'm definitely more interested in the eligibilities for 2025, and for NFBC formats, that's 20 games. There is a possibility we could see Alex Bregman make that, with most teams having about 35 games to go in the regular season. So if he would get 20 starts at first base, that would be great. The 10 or 5 in some leagues that gets us eligibility for this season, it can be nice, but it's not something I'm really looking at. I think the spots and the teams at this point in the season where it's much of an advantage to us are are pretty few and far between. Sure, some of us have some teams where maybe we drafted Shohei Ohtani, he's been our designated hitter, and then we hit on an extra second baseman and we can't get everybody in our lineup, or we have 6 great outfielders and really wish we could get one more in our lineup. Then yes, adding an eligibility so we can get them in our lineup over one of our weaker spots is great, but I don't think that really happens all that often. Where it does, it's amazing. For the most part, the position eligibility at this point that I'm interested in is, yeah, if guys are adding a position for next season, that's where I'm more interested.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the other big name that I mentioned off air before we're recording is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is still playing third base. From time to
Yeah.
time, he had 2 or 3 starts in a row recently. I think he's up to 8 or 9 starts now at the position. I love the fact that I have him in a Yahoo league. He already gained the position, so I've had that flexibility for the last couple weeks. But in most cases, agreed. Like, it's not doing much for me for the rest of the season, but it's going to play a role in if he actually does gets to 20 games this year and has that dual eligibility going into 2025 drafts, especially after the season he's been, he's kind of shown back up this year. So just something to obviously think about for next year's drafts. Has absolutely no bearing on your Faab considerations going into this week. So that's a
Yeah,
lot
2
to
games in a row back at third base
Yep,
on his 7th and 8th of the
there
season.
it
You're
is.
you were dead on with the 8. So, yeah, this would be interesting, needing about a third of the remaining games to be at third base. That could get close for Vlad.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he came up as a third baseman. He wanted to stay at the hot corner. He was very vocal about it as he was coming up. Moved for, reasons, very good reasons. But if he's done what he needs to do to stay in shape and get over there and kind of prove to the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays want to keep him as happy as possible because they actually might want to consider either, extending him or wanting him to be extended. They're going to do what he wants to do. So something to keep an eye on. All right. Well, lots of other news surely happened by the time you're done listening to this, or happened and we didn't talk about it because we try to keep things as Faab related as possible. Make sure you're listening to the First Pitch podcast. Casey, Bubba, and Jake Crumpler. They break down all the news, the highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy leagues down the stretch. Of course, Nick Pollock has you covered with everything starting pitching on the Plus Pitch podcast. He highlights every starting pitching performance from the day prior, and also looking ahead at tomorrow's streaming options for every matchup going on for you to consider. So listen to both of those podcasts wherever you're listening to this one. You can listen to them or watch them soon on YouTube as well. In just a moment, we're going to get into our actual Faab recommendations. But of course, before we do that, we got to take a quick break. All right, we're back, Kevin. Let's get right into it. We are running into our 22nd Faab run of the 2024 season. And obviously, we're pinching it at whatever categories we can make the most stride in with the final couple weeks ahead of us as we get closer and closer to that September mark. Let's get some power on the docket here. Home runs, RBIs, who's out there. This is usually a category we say it's been hard to stream because they just haven't been out there. But injuries and new opportunities and teams realizing they're completely out of it have maneuvered different, players into the scope. So what's out there that we can consider?
Yeah, so there's some guys this week, and a couple of them even with some 15-team eligibility. First, I'm gonna go to my Kansas City Royals. Paul DeYoung has been amazing, and typically versus left-handed pitching. He has getting a couple of starts here and there versus righties, but has been starting versus every lefty. He's available in about 2/3 of 12 teamers, but only 16% of the 15 team NFBC main event. Since coming to the Kansas City Royals, very small sample, only 47 plate appearances, but Paul DeYoung in that time, 286, 3 home runs, 8 RBI, 7 runs scored. The Royals have 8 games this upcoming week. 4 of them appear to be versus left-handed pitching. So my guess is we've been seeing him in about half of the games versus righties. The doubleheader that Kansas City has to make this 8 games is on Monday and does appear to be against 2 lefties. I do think we'll see him in both games of the doubleheader, a couple of the games versus righties. So even though it's 4 lefties, I think we see Paul DeYoung 6 times this week, at least 5, but probably even 6 games. So a full week for a short side platoon player is great. JJ Bleday, universally rostered in 15 teamers, but is available in 20% of the 12 team online championships. I just wanted to bring that up. I don't think the run that JJ Bleday has been on recently is a surprise to anybody. It was a surprise to me that he was available in 20% of 12 teamers. I thought he would be universally rostered there as well. Since taking over the everyday role in Atlanta, Ramon Laureano, I poo-pooed this earlier in the season. I thought he was a depth move, which it was, and they've needed that depth, is why we're seeing him. But I wasn't really that interested, but very similarly to Paul DeYoung. Since taking over the everyday role, 45 plate appearances compared to the 47 for DeYoung since he went to Kansas City, 4 home runs, hitting 341, similar RBI and run total. So he's producing as well over the same time period. And then a guy that I think most of us thought, yeah, we'll see a few home runs. He's going to start striking out so much. He's going to lose his job. He's going back to the minors. But Yonkinzi Noel for Cleveland is still mashing baseballs. And yes, he is 91% rostered in main events, but only 25% in the 12-team RotoWire online championships. And Yokinzi Noel, excuse me, is definitely 12-team viable the way he's been not striking out as much as we thought he might. That could change. That could end very quickly. But for right now, he's hitting with a lot of power.
Yeah, as I'm trying to scroll through all of these Process Plus rolling charts for all the guys that you're mentioning. Some of these are a little bit more difficult because they just don't have as many pitches. Noel, obviously, with only 360 pitches, the sample size here not showing me a real good sense.
Yeah, it's a pretty spaced out graph compared to what we're used to with both these guys. Yeah, still
The
looks pretty good though.
Yeah, no, they're both in the right direction. The one that stood out the most was the first one. I'll go back over to the Young's graph here, just to kind of point out one thing, especially about Process Plus, is that it's not about one aspect of their game. So you look through this, and yeah, the line itself, even at its peak, is right about MLB average. But what's really driving him up has always been what Paul DeJong has brought to the table, and is his power. So his power has been able to shine through that much more because he's making better decisions, and because his contact is still below average, but less than
Not as
below
far below.
average
Yeah.
than it has been. So it's like with all those three things kind of clicking in place at the same time, or at least not dragging the other ones down as much, you can really start seeing some positive improvements. And obviously, you need the opportunity as well. And DeJong may be getting, or is getting that opportunity in with your Royals. Unfortunately, Kevin, it seems to be at the expense of Michael Garcia, who is
I
just
knew you were going to bring that up.
I had to. I texted you during the week. I'm like, can you please tell them to stop doing this? Because when they do put Garcia back in the lineup, he's still leading off. Like,
Right.
Just stop it.
Fortunately, we have an 8-game week with 4 lefties and 4 righties, the way it appears right now, coming. So Michael Garcia will be leading off versus those 4 lefties. And like DeJong, I expect to see him at least one, if not twice, versus the righties lower down in the lineup. But yeah, it has been frustrating. Fortunately, this coming week, we have some games versus lefties. So we know we'll see him those games.
All right. Thank you. You make me feel a little bit better there. I appreciate it. Well, let's talk about some speed. Obviously, even though Garcia is, maybe sitting a game or two here or there, nobody's dropping him. So he's not available. But Kevin, who is?
Anybody from Tampa right now that has availability we want to look at. Since the All-Star break, Tampa is by far outpacing Washington in stolen bases, and Washington hasn't slowed down. Tampa's just turning everybody loose. Taylor Walls, I talked about him when Todd Whitestone was here. Is that 3 weeks ago now, I think? If you're protecting batting average or trying to gain in batting average, don't pay any attention to what I'm about to say. But yeah, Taylor Walls has 6 stolen bases since the break. And recently, the past 3 weeks now, is actually hitting like 280. So he's not hurting our batting average. I wouldn't count on that. But he is the everyday shortstop and will take off when he does get on base. Johnny DeLuca, similar batting average problems to Taylor Walls, but has been running lately. Everybody has. Josh Lowe, Brandon Lau, anybody you find on Tampa that has availability, they have just all of a sudden decided, yeah, we're running on everybody.
Yeah, they used to be a team that I would expect to be running all the time, and they didn't really like completely fall off a cliff, but they really weren't at that they just weren't at that top level that we saw for quite a while. So I don't know, it's nice to see them get back and write their own prophecy, wherever that cliche is once again.
Couple of names we mention almost every week in this category as well. Whit Merrifield, a couple more stolen bases this week. He is playing every day in Atlanta. He had a stolen base the first 2 games in Atlanta, and then hadn't had one since, and now 2 more this week. So yeah, he's always an option. And yes, I'm going to bring up Dairon Blanco.
There it is.
Especially if you had him if you had him in your lineup over the weekend and got 3 home runs out of him. I did not. But that was absolutely amazing. Congratulations to anybody that had him in their lineup over the weekend. But he did another stolen base already this week. And with those 4 lefties coming up, he's actually been starting versus left-handed pitching recently in center field. Kyle Isbell sitting versus lefties. So we're going to see a lot of opportunities for Dairon Blanco this coming week, and maybe another home run or 2. Who knows?
I was expecting you to bring up Blanco in the power category after what we saw this past week.
I should have.
You're gonna bring him up somehow. You gotta start switching it up. You gotta put him in different categories. All right. Well, new category here. Maybe you can find a way to get Blanco into this one next week. The opportunity. If you can just get Blanco some more opportunities to play, I think he'd get picked up a lot more often. But as you say, Blanc, he's just one of those guys where because he's so fast, he can steal bases even when he's on the bench. He can still provide you that value if that's the category you absolutely need. But let's talk about guys who actually have an opportunity ahead of themselves. Starting off, of course, with our schedule notes. We have a whole lot of games with at least 7 games. Whole lot of teams with with at least 7 games. We'll start off with in a couple that have 8 games. Just the one team with the 8 games. So with all the teams down the line, hopefully you're taking notes. I'm going to do this quick. Boston, Toronto, the White Sox, Cleveland. They have a double header, so they still have Monday. They have a double header on Monday, but they're off on Thursday, still giving them 7 games. Detroit and then Kansas City, as you mentioned, have the 8 games with a double header on Monday as well. Houston, Atlanta, Miami, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Colorado, San Diego, Milwaukee, and Cincinnati. They're the last 2 both off on Monday with a doubleheader on Friday. Because there's so many teams that have at least 7 games, nobody has 2 off days once again for the second week in a row. And then obviously nobody has any odd days off except for these double headers. Colorado is home for all 7 of their games, with Miami visiting for 4 and Baltimore visiting for the weekend series. Cincinnati is home also for 7. Oakland going into Cincinnati to start the week, and then Milwaukee has 4 over the weekend series in, as Nick Paula calls it, Sin City with a C, obviously. So with all that in mind, Kevin, and anything else that you've seen, what players stand out as having a good opportunity ahead of themselves for this week or the following?
Yeah, there's several, and the ones I wrote down, the ones I picked out. This I anticipated this a little bit. Ryan O'Hearn is available. He was universally rostered. He had slowed down a little bit, and then Baltimore last weekend and then this week was facing a ton of left-handed pitching. And so he was dropped in a few more places. Not a ton of availability, but it's worth checking because not only are 5 of 6 of next week's games appear to be versus right-handed pitching, but they're at the LA Dodgers and at Colorado, 2 great ballparks for power specifically this season. The Miami Marlins have 4 games at Colorado and then 3 at San Francisco. Now that would seem to a lot of people probably to like, why would you mention Colorado and San Francisco? Because they're both humongous outfields. This isn't about hitting home runs. This is about BABIP. This is about getting on base. 4 out of 7 of those games appear to be against left-handed pitching, including 3 for 3 over the weekend at San Francisco. So Connor Norby, 35% in 15 teams rostered, only 3% in 12s. Jonah Bride for power, 91% in 15s, but only 24% in 12s. Derek Hill doing a little bit of everything, not a ton of anything, but a little bit of everything. Players like this can be great for us this time of year. 35% in 15s, 2% in 12s. And then we brought up Otto Lopez in the stolen base category a couple of weeks, and kind of like Taylor Walls and a couple of the others we talked this week, I was like, the batting average is horrendous. You can't do this if you're protecting batting average. He's actually hitting for a decent batting average since then. 63% rostered in 15s, but only 7% in 12s. So any of these Miami guys, I think with the humongous outfields they're going to be facing for the entire week, and 4 of the 7 of those games versus left-handed pitching, I like all these right-handed hitters for Miami.
I'm something that we didn't mention in the news section, but I got to ask you about is there's obviously somebody that has a new opportunity ahead of them and that's due to an injury. Austin Riley hitting the IL for Atlanta. They go and sign Gio Urshela, and he seems to slot it into everyday third base opportunities. Granted, bottom of the lineup, Atlanta's lineup, not what it used to be. I used to always say, if you can get a piece of the Atlanta lineup, you probably should. I'm not saying that anymore at this point, unless it's a name brand, but an opportunity is still an opportunity. At the bottom of a winning ball club's lineup, is Gio Urshela somebody worth like at least considering in any kind of category just due to the playing time at this point?
Yeah, absolutely, especially in leagues where you are, if not only protecting your batting average, maybe trying to improve a little bit. We know Gio Urshela can hit for a nice batting average, and it hasn't been up to his normal standards so far this season. But a lot of times, getting in a lineup like the Braves, even though they have been underperforming,
Mhm.
he's taken the spot of one of the guys that was underperforming. We've seen flashes from, uh, oh goodness, I told you I draw a blank
Whit,
on
Whit Merrifield,
no, it wasn't Whit
nah,
Merrifield. Uh, Oh goodness. First baseman, slugger, Olson.
Torkelson.
Right? Yeah, we've seen him start to pick it up a little bit at times, and then he goes 3 or 4 games without a hit again. But we have seen the lineup starting to look up a little bit recently. So a guy like Urshela could get in here, and yeah, he's projected for a 275 batting average across the board on the projections for the rest of the season. Couple of home runs, double-digit runs in RBI in about 100 plate appearances. He gets in this lineup, and gets the vibe going and is having fun again. Why not 4 or 5 home runs with that 275 batting average? Yeah, Urshela's a great ad this week, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and it's showing that he's playing every day. He's started every game since starting, and then it includes against that lefty just today as well. So we're not looking at any kind of platoon. It looks like a very similar situation to Whit Merrifield coming in, taking over that second base spot when Ozzy Albies went down, who's not expected to be back until mid-September or so as well. So we're starting to see guys just being like scrapped by other teams, picked up by a good team who need it, who have an opportunity, and hopefully they can run. I mean, Merrifield's been running with that opportunity as well. He's been very much so useful in most situations on a fantasy standpoint. Urshela has the opportunity to do the same thing. All right, so
Absolutely.
lots of hitting opportunities out there in different categories. Keep an eye on all of those in your availability in your leagues. So let's get into some pitching, and we're going to do that after this break. Try to make those ad breaks as obviously as possible as we get through those. So I think anybody listening here is already expecting that at this point. So thanks, you guys, for bearing with us on those. But Kevin, let's get right into our pitching options for the week here. Of course, we'll get into wins and strikeouts, our volume cats that you can do whatever you know where you're at this point. Like, you either are streaming like crazy because you're desperate for those, and you're like, oh, all right, my ratios are shot anyway, or you got to be very particular so that you can balance those out. But we're only talking about wins and Ks here, of course. Who are you targeting in those volume categories going into the week?
Yeah, unfortunately, in leagues where I'm chasing wins and Ks, even if I'm not worried about my ratios, it really appears at this point that I'm probably going relievers in those spots next week. There's not a whole lot there that I see. We've been rattling off quite a few names most weeks. Very happy with the Washington lefties versus Colorado this week. Worked out better than the Diamondbacks lefties versus them last week. That was nice to see. But this week, I don't see a whole lot there. A couple of the things that I looked at but then didn't put down on the outline. For your Boston Red Sox, Cooper Criswell is intriguing to me this week. I don't know that. Yes, I want that start at Detroit next weekend, but I don't know if I can throw him out there versus Toronto and Fenway. I'm not scared of Toronto. I'm scared of Fenway. So, but he's shown flashes of being better like he was earlier in the season recently. So I'm intrigued by Criswell. Definitely, if I'm not worried about my ratios, I like Cooper Criswell this week. There was a couple of others that I want to bring up. I should have wrote them down on the outline, even though I didn't want to recommend them for the week. But not a whole lot out there of guys that are available
Sure.
in the spots that I want them. That's the issue. These guys are all rostered. Even Michael Lorenzen, and he's going to be at Cleveland and at Houston two-step this week, and he's pretty heavily rostered now. But the one guy I did write down is at Detroit this week, and then he gets Seattle back at home. He's a right-handed pitcher. So even though Seattle's better than Detroit, love that start as well. And that's Johnny Cueto, who looked for a 38-year-old, looked
He's got
good
nothing
against
to
the
lose.
Kansas City
Yep.
Royals.
Yeah.
He was good on Wednesday versus the Royals. He still throws the timing off with his different wind-ups on each pitch. And with those matchups, and these teams haven't seen Johnny Cueto this year, right? So that
Sure.
timing is a big deal. So with these matchups, I am very interested in Johnny Cueto this week. And by the way, it was amazing to see the Kansas City fans give him a
They
standing ovation as he walked off the field. Yep, they didn't win that 2015 World Series without him.
No, they did good by Johnny Cueto in that game. So well done, Royals fans, showing other fans how to do it. That was that type of situation. So way to set the standard there. Yeah, I mean it's rough because it's like in most situations, either there's a lot of smart people out there playing the game. You got to be at least a week ahead, or at the very like there's going to be a lot of like you get to a point where you're like, I can't stream anymore, like I can't stream as much as I could. I got to hold on to this
Who
guy.
was it last week? Well, it was Ryan Pipio that I thought would have
Sure.
availability, and there was zero availability, and I thought he'd
Right.
have quite a bit. Yeah, we're at that point.
Yep. And so also to your original point, going at like this, if you're going to go after relievers for wins, to chasing wins or vulturing wins like that, or even bulk strikeouts, this is that week with all those teams having 7 games with a couple, or at least the 8-game stint, as well with Kansas City. There's going to be a lot more opportunity in general for bullpens to get involved. A lot of bullpens are, a little thinned out right now. So some of the better ones probably are going to get a little bit more opportunities if they have a lot of tight games throughout the course of the week. So keep an eye on that. So as we get into the ratios category, which is where we typically hear about some relievers, who we got in that can help us chip away at those ratios, whether it's ERA, WHIP, or at least guys aren't going to hurt us in the category.
Yeah, Uncle Ted brought this one up earlier in the chat, and Porter Hodge has been absolutely amazing for the Cubs, which is kind of interesting to hear that someone in the Cubs bullpen has been amazing,
Good,
right?
yeah, right.
So, but Porter Hart, I think it's for the entire season, his ERA is 2.08, I believe, and a 0.86 WHIP. And recently, more than a strikeout per inning when he's getting in there. And he's somebody they're going to lean on through these heavy schedules you were just talking about over the next week or two for all of these MLB teams. And the ratios have been great. The strikeouts are there. I believe he has a win and a save over the past couple of weeks. I'd like to see that as well when we're talking about these guys, especially when we're looking at it from the aspect of there aren't any starters available. I may be throwing a third, if not a fourth reliever this week, not necessarily for saves, but instead of my back end starters with their horrible matchups. So yeah, and he easily adds to the list. Like you always like to remind people, really dig in with all these heavy schedules this week. Really pay attention to who didn't need to be used on Saturday and Sunday. Uh, Not being used on Sunday is good enough for me. Not being used on Saturday or Sunday is amazing. And with these heavy schedules coming up, I think these guys can actually get us a little bit of volume this week as well.
Yeah, I mean, I normally am jumping on that, that policy. You know me every single week. I don't think it's necessary for Porter Hodge this week, especially with the news that I deliberately left out of the outline because I figured we'd talk about it here anyway. With Hector Neris being released by the Cubs, obviously opening up the closer role. Even if it is any kind of part-time role, it does look like Porter Hodge is at least in consideration. Now the Cubs aren't haven't given another save opportunity since Hodge got his save. So there's obviously speculation there's that Jorge Lopez could be involved in that situation as well. So I guess it'll work itself out. But Hodge obviously provides more upside than Lopez does, even without that role. So Hodge, I think, is going to be going in every one of your leagues anyway. So just know this isn't one of those spec ads that usually fits into this category. This is one that's gonna go. So you're gonna need to spend more than $1 or $2 on Porter Hodge if he is available in your league. So keep an eye on the situation in your league and who might be going after some spec save situations. Even though, as we just talked about at the beginning of the show, there are a lot of them at this point.
Yes.
Most of them are speculation ads for saves, but they're still there. They're still like, it's more like there's been plenty of times in the season that we've talked about. All right, if you have to look for a spec save situation, maybe it'll happen later on, like a couple weeks or whatever. Who you stashing? There's not like an obvious like, ooh, this guy could take over the role tomorrow, or there's 2 or 3 guys that could be the closer. We're not sure yet. It's more of those, but there's a lot of them. So we talked about a bunch of them in the news section. Who's kind of your favorite in this category, Kevin? Because saves is the next category here. Who like of all the ones we talked about earlier, and any other ones that we maybe forgot to mention? Who you got your eye on?
Yeah, this is the guy I had in the previous category last week. So it's almost like
Moving
cheating a
up.
little bit. But we didn't know Pete Fairbanks was heading to the IL when we recorded last week. So Edwin
Hold on.
Usita.
Yeah, we knew Pete Fairbanks was heading to the IL at some point. We just
Yeah,
didn't
right.
know it was going to be this week.
We didn't know it was going to be this week. Fair, yes. So I like him a lot, but the other situations we talked about, I would look at Lopez with the Cubs. I think they want to use Porter Hodge highest leverage, which means he'll get some of the save opportunities, but I think typically they'll probably use Hodge earlier in a game, and Lopez will get more of the ninth inning opportunities. We talked about Kansas City, Urseg being the guy now, but he's rostered everywhere. People soured on Ben Joyce, but he had a pretty good week, throwing 105 mile an hour for 3 pitches past Bobby Witt Jr. In the game on Tuesday when the Angels beat the Royals. So the all the situations we talked about earlier, and some of the ones that we're not sure about, Arizona, right? Justin Martinez. Did I get the name right? I know it's Justin. Let me look real fast. In Arizona.
In
Yeah,
Arizona,
Justin
yeah, you're right.
Martinez.
Justin Martinez,
Yeah,
yeah.
some of these guys aren't universally rostered because we weren't sure, and now they look more solidified. So, yeah, Urseg, Justin Martinez, they're worth checking to see if they're available. Usita for the guys that we didn't know coming into this week, it would be my first option.
So yeah, the other options Tampa Bay has a couple other options that we know their history. Manuel Rodriguez, top of the chain in there as well. And then Ponch obviously had some history at the back
Yeah.
end of that very bullpen for a little bit as well. So yeah, Uceta seems obviously got to save already. So possession is 9/10 and all that. So you at least give him the benefit of the doubt moving forward. I know he was my pickup in my daily moves leagues already, and yeah, he'll be at the top of my queue when it comes down to Sunday as well. Yeah, I like the logic, obviously, in Chicago. That I mean, obviously Hodge has more upside as we just talked about, but let's also keep in mind money is still a factor. Jorge Lopez is in the final year of his extension. He does have I believe it's a team option for like $2 million for next year. So I don't think him getting a couple extra saves at the end of the year is going to impact that at all. But
Right.
somewhere down the line, Porter Hodge already starting to add to what could be a lengthy closer position and save total will lead into arbitration at some point or another. And so that obviously it's always going to be a consideration as well. So keep that in mind as we go through the weekend, or as you look back on the weekend and see what actually happened leading up to Sunday as well. All right, Kevin, it's my favorite one, even at this time of year. Wild card section here. Give me somebody fun for the last couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, I'm looking at a couple of minor league pitchers, big names that we talked about last offseason that we haven't seen yet, that I think we could still see this season. Mizorowski in Milwaukee, I think we will see him. Unfortunately, I think it's probably going to be a bullpen role. They've really cut back on his innings over the past month or so. He was throwing as a starter, getting 6 innings plus many of his starts up through July 12th, and now 3 1/3, 3 2/3, 1 inning, 2 innings, 1 2/3, 2 innings, 2 innings, pitching well, but not the innings. Definitely not stretched out at the moment, not going over not going over 2 innings since July 28th. So that's a little disappointing. But Jackson Jobe, I think we might see. Not because Detroit's in it, but because Detroit has a nice young foundation and I think wants to see what they have going into next season. That we saw the couple of call-ups last week with Sweeney, Parker Meadows is back, Chase uh, goodness, I'm drawing blank too many times this week. I shouldn't have brought it up, Adams, because now I'm doing
Torkelson's
it
back
even
up.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, but I think Detroit wants to see their young core they believe they have going forward. So I think we might actually see Jackson Jobe get some innings. Remember, he missed some time this season as well. He's got 59 innings pitched on the season. If they want to get 120, 140 out of him next year, they probably want to see 80 or 90 this season. So I really think we still might see Jackson Jobe, even though Detroit's out of the race.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like I've heard this before about Detroit, like many times over the last couple years. Detroit just needs to
Casey
see
Mize.
They just need to see what
All
their
this
core is gonna look like. I mean,
yeah.
how many iterations of this core are they gonna have? But yeah, jokes aside, I mean, the logic is sound and it makes sense from just logic standpoint. Plus, we are getting closer and closer, or if we haven't hit it already, to that mark where he'll keep rookie eligibility regardless if he plays the remainder of the season on the roster. So I think we actually, yeah, if I'm doing my math right, at least by Sunday, they will at least hit there won't be more than 40 days left in the regular season for him to be on the roster. So,
Well, the days in September don't count, but the at bats still do. So it's
or the
really
innings
all about
pitched.
at bats
Sure.
now.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
the days no longer count in
Oh,
September.
right, right,
I,
right,
I
right, right.
believe that's still the case.
Okay. So yeah, hence the whole September call ups of the cup of coffee, that
Yeah.
from the old rules still
You
kind of
still
apply.
can't go over the threshold in at bats or innings though. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So that's good to know. Um, And then, I mean, I'm gonna give an extra shout out because I'm gonna actually give a retort to Uncle Ted here. Keeps mentioning that Rasmussen, because he's back for Tampa Bay, is a must add here. I'm gonna push back a little bit on that one. They've already announced that like he's not going to be stretched out. He's gonna be playing. He's gonna be pitching 1 or 2 innings. So I think, Uncle Ted, what you're trying to say is that, he'd make a good closer option as well. I say this all the time about guys that aren't going to be stretched out, and it never happens. Like, they never end up moving the guy into the 8th or 9th inning until it's too late, until you get to a Michael Kopech situation where it's just been long enough. Finally, you do the thing that you should have been doing, instead of, because they obviously want him to be a starter for next year as well. So they want to keep him in that kind of role where you're starting fresh and, you're starting that rhythm, rather than coming into a 2-1 game or something with a little bit more pressure at the end of a game. It's just a different mentality from what I'm, seeing and gathering, that I do not expect that to happen. Kevin, do you have any expectation that they would use Rasmussen in any other way besides basically an opener for the remainder of the season?
Probably not. I could, if they did, it would be in a postseason game, right?
Oh,
Or
sure.
like the
That
final weekend, when that weekend is acting as a postseason game. When if they think he's their best option versus the matchups, they'll use him in any situation. But we won't see that until there's only a handful of games left, unfortunately.
Yeah, agreed. Hey, not taking anything away from the guy's talent or what he could
Right.
be possibly doing. I just, the value for what I see, taking up a roster spot in most situations, in most leagues, isn't going to work out the way we want. The same way that it seems like Garrett Crochet is not going to be stretched out the way he said he wanted to be. Green
Right.
Sizemore announcing that he's only going to be going, a good 4 innings on pretty much every start going on from here on out, as well. So unless they give him an opener in the White Sox, we're not seeing any more wins at a Garrett Crochet here. All right, Kevin, great recommendations here. Great news to go over. Leave us with any kind of final tidbits to add on to all this great stuff we just talked about.
It's carrying over from the past couple of weeks. Keep at it, and all the little things add up to a big thing. And I say that over and over all season long, and those little things get more and more important, and the big thing gets bigger the later in the season we get. So like I know that fantasy football, Labor Day holidays coming up, school just started, getting our kids to and from places they need to go, all this stuff. But I'm actually spending more time on my teams over the past week or two, not less, looking more into what do I think my opponents are doing in Faab this week, right? Looking into that. Who's bidding where? Not many teams have much money. In most of my leagues, I am fortunate. I've stuck to my guns where even if my balance is fairly low, it's higher than most people's. But that's where you really got to start looking at even if you don't do it earlier in the season like we should. We not everybody wants to put as much time in every week of the season, but we're at that point where there's a lot of information out there that we gotta dig up before we make our own decisions, and yep, categories, be realistic, be realistic in whether or not you can actually gain those points, because it's not, if you're behind 5 home runs, you don't just need 5 home runs, you need 5 more home runs than they've been hitting every
Right.
week throughout the season, right? Be realistic when you're looking at your categories, and don't forget to look how many people can catch you in a category.
I just
So, just so many things to look at.
Yeah, I'm glad you ended with that. I'm going to make sure I pointed out you can't not look in the rearview mirror as well. Because just because you maybe can't jump the guy up 5 home runs ahead of you, the person behind you is only 1 home run behind you. You still got to hold on to that point. So too many things to consider as you and plus you've got 10 categories that it all applies to. So lots to consider. Great thoughts there, Kevin.
One more
Uh,
thing, I haven't talked about this in a while. They're starting to put out the updates for the schedule at Baseball HQ's First Pitch Arizona. It's only a couple of months away. So if you haven't made it out there in the past, or if you have and took some weeks off, but yeah, it is absolutely fabulous time and very educational as well. Not just a good time. Watch a lot of baseball, talk a lot of fantasy baseball, hang out with friends. I can't recommend First Pitch Arizona enough, as anybody that's ever listened to this show before definitely knows.
No, but it's a good point. You talk about it a lot, but the majority of the things you talk about is how fun it is and how relaxing it is and how it's cool to see everybody in the industry and then others as well. But yeah, it's centered around an actual conference where there's actual seminars and there's actual speakers and panels and you learn stuff. That's the whole idea. So I'm glad you
Yeah,
gave that an extra shout out there.
and the people that we listen to, other podcasts, the people whose writings we read, talk about things there that they don't talk about throughout the year. It really is extra information.
There you go. Yeah, and we may, reference it on a show or two throughout the off season, but like nobody's sharing the entire panel or anything like that. So
Exactly.
if you want that info, you got to go. Simple as that.
Yep. 100%.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for episode 178 of On the Wire. They're all that and everything else. I am Adam Howe, and on behalf of Kevin Hasting, thanks for listening. We bid you goodbye.